In an intriguing episode of the Endless Possibilities podcast, host Garrett explores the journey of San Qing, a Taoist master. San's path, ignited by a life-altering event, leads him from physical to spiritual pursuits. San delves into the influence of energy work and channeling on self-realization. He promotes unique paths and the exploration of inherent healing abilities. Embark on this spiritual voyage and unlock your endless possibilities.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. My name is Garrett and I'm very excited today to introduce my latest guest, San Qing. Hello, San. I'm going to just give you a brief introduction. Taoist master San Qing is a profound healer. When he talks, there is something else that goes on in the room. The room is filled with light and love. Taoist master San Qing has over 30 years experience guiding people, teaching people, opening people up to their true potential as human being, as light being, as just being. San Qing is an ordained priest and 66th generation lineage holder and 126th generation lineage holder of Daoism. San is a Taoist master of Qigong and Nigong. He is a prolific channel and healer who has built a reputation for direct access to the spirit realm. He is grateful every day to his teachers, the three pure ones, and the Tao, for allowing him to witness miracles. San works with people all over the world, showing them that the impossible is possible. San, good to have you on.
So great to be here, brother. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. And as everyone can notice, it's an energy. And you and I just bonded and remembered who we were. And it's always great to just be present and have a conversation with amazing beings like yourself.
Yeah. So San invited me on his podcast. It's the Way 126. And we had a great conversation. And then off camera, we also chatted quite a bit as well, twice. Yeah, and we found out we had a lot in common. So San is back today with me as a guest, and we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to dive into his story because it's a fascinating story. And San, I guess we'll take it right back to how you ended up on this spiritual path, this journey.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Yeah. You know, it starts in roots buried in the Australian landscape. As a young boy, you start reflecting on these things and things start to make more sense. This is generally, how people create or realize they have an epiphany of what they've been doing their whole life. It's just a refresher, right? So you get a greater sense of that and you shift gears and go into all different sort of places. But it started when I was a young boy. And quite frankly, looking at it clearly, my first near-death experience made it very evident that there was something going on. And so I was living in a small town in the rural area of New South Wales. And I was riding home from school, I think, and I was on my bike and I drove. Our house was sort of just out on the outskirts of town. And I was riding towards the house. And basically in the distance, I heard there was a car behind me. It was coming over a railway track and I was heading towards my family home. Before you know it, I got hit by a car head on. Basically, the only reason I survived was because the actual bike rammed under the vehicle. I flew up in the air. I looked at the tops of the trees, dropped down at the side of the road, basically got up, and the instinct was I got to see my mother before I die. That was the first thing. And the second I took a step forward, I fell backwards and came right out of my body. Basically flew around like Peter Pan. And it was interesting all over the place. And this sort of was a seed of basically the narrative of my whole life, this fascination with the supernatural. And so when I was flying around in the trees and I was literally looking down at my mother running towards my body on the ground, just absolutely devastated, all of this was taking place as I'm observing it. And the second they took my body and dropped it on the table in basically the emergency room, this Peter Pan experience drew me back into my physical body, and then I woke up. And this was the first evidence for me that there was something greater. Now, what happened was, yeah, he had a little graze, nothing big, no big deal. Now, you have to understand that I should have died. And now, collectively, when I look at it in retrospect, this is constantly taking place throughout my life, as most people discover this. From that point, I moved into this fascination with bodybuilding and superheroes. And, of course, everyone was mesmerized by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Arnold Schwarzenegger was an intricate part of my development because I was raised by a single parent. Moreover, a woman, in that time in history, women didn't have exactly the same type of social status. So I was working against many things. Little did I know, I didn't seem to feel as though I was absent or missing something in my life. I drew myself to, pop culture, movies, all this type of stuff where my imagination can create all these incredible scenarios, the movie stars, the superheroes. And so I always had this fascination with bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I picked that basically Education of a Bodybuilder by Arnold Schwarzenegger up when I was 10 years old. I looked at it and went, I could do that. And so this fascination started, and then it was basically catapulted into the forefront of my obsession as a child, because then I presented this sort of level of adversity in the school environment where kids were bullying me because I was a little different, a little sharper per se. I didn't spend much time on the academics, yet I would always absorb all the information. It was just what I assumed was everyone had this ability. And so it presented this sort of continual sort of conflict that I had with the kids thinking that I was different. And I had to sort of deal with that on a daily basis. And you start to realize, oh my goodness, all this stuff develops you to have a greater insight to your reality as a seeker. Because really, the Taoist path is a seeker. We parallel these things from my observation, involved in this for 30 years. Gnosticism is very similar because it's a self-realization. You want to discover what the truth is to you, not to, Gareth, not to me, not to John Smith, to you. And that's why it's so powerful once you realize that you have the ability to access this truth and know what the truth is as a whole. And that comes with, greater understanding of the energetics. So through my childhood, I dealt with this adversity. I got involved with bodybuilding to sort of basically have me feel whole and feel as though I could be confident enough to ward off these bullies. This turned into sort of like a bodybuilding, powerlifting obsession, competed a couple of times. And by the end of my teens, I was really deep into powerlifting and bodybuilding to a point where I was really hitting some numbers that were kind of like abnormally not normal. And, a lot of people in my environment were like, okay, well, what exactly are you doing to do this? And in my mind, it was the mind. I read it in a book. The book tells me I could do it. Let's do this. And so from there, it got to a certain point where my physical body was telling me, look, you've had enough. You need to back off. There's an excessive amount of load and strain. And in my mind, I had this message, go and find this thing called meditation. Now, that was really strange because I had this instinct that sort of guided me through my childhood, helped me survive through adversity, people not accepting me. I was a little different, having this obsession with, the imagination. And so when I got to that point, I was like looking around for this thing called meditation. Back in those days, and you're probably familiar with this, there was very little to no information on this. It's like you come across Hare Krishnas, you come across the idea of yogi, Buddhism, and then it's sort of left a little blank. Like today, you know, we're talking about an environment where meditation is like the normal, you know, list of your menu of waking up in the morning. Americans will meditate, they will exercise, they'll do all these things. Now, back in the 60s, when, you know, the Beatles brought in this whole psychedelic idea of accessing a greater state of consciousness, was so foreign to most people. Yet, when I got involved with meditating over 30 years ago, it was like, okay, what does that mean? In my mind, I'm like, they said stillness. We didn't have the internet. You can't look it up on the internet. It's like, okay, stillness, quiet, a guy in an orange robe. I don't know whether that makes sense to me. I pick things up, I crush them, I throw them around. And so I got involved with this. I found this little class. It was handed out by a grandmaster. And she was like basically giving out this free little meditation class in a rec center in a ghetto, actually. And when I got there, I was like, this is not happening. Like, this is actually quite a bad neighborhood. I'm not sure I'm going to make it out alive once I get out of the rec center back to my car. There's noise going on everywhere, dogs barking, ambulances. It's bad. It's really bad. And so the voice said, go inside. So I went inside, cute little 50-pound little Asian woman. And I was like, oh, this is not going to work. And so she said, everyone come and sit down. And I looked around the room and there was half a dozen misfits. And I was like, oh, look, beggars can't be choosers. We're all looking for the same thing. It's a freebie. I'm here. Let me see what happens, right? And so I sit down and I'm this big gorilla trying to sit in the lotus position. My back's hurting. I'm like, this really isn't working. I'm starting to process these things. It's not going to work, you know? And I'm hearing stuff in the background. There's noise outside. I'm like, I guess the best thing that's going to happen here is I could potentially get stabbed and killed on the way back to my car. I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? So I'm sitting there and my distraction was the noise. My back, I cannot get in this thing they call a lotus position because I'm just an overgrown gorilla. And then I hear her go, now I want you to listen to my voice. And the second thought I had was, okay, I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish by attempting to take my back pain away, the noise, everything else. So she goes, I want you to listen to my voice and then everything will fall away. And then that second, it was basically, I was looking at her with my eyes open and she was like, and I went, what? Oh, I had never experienced anything so powerful. Well, little did I know this was an application I was applying throughout my whole bodybuilding obsession and being immersed in the human form and all the rest of it, imagination. And I was like, I've captured something so powerful that I didn't think was possible. I am shifting now. Now, these are words that I'm familiar with 30 years later. When I was there, it was just like, I'd never experienced anything before like this. I don't take drugs. I don't do drugs. And all of a sudden, the state that I'm in is just completely silent. And I was like, this is it. This is the answer to everything. I don't know what it is, but it's the answer. So then, of course, it drew me into this voice telling me, you've got to go and find, you know, teachers to help you understand this. And that took me on a ride where within the following couple of weeks, I found a channeling teacher, some other teachers that were helping me with this sort of like idea of a greater state. Now, this is where it got really crazy. Within the first time I ever meditated to the channeling, I channeled Lao Tzu for the first time, blew the roof off this whole, you know, experience. My teacher had 60 years in the bag on biologically, consciously cultivating channeling, and was like, what? He was not happy. He was like, this is deflating my whole journey, this whole idea. It's like, this happens to so many people these days where you get into this state and all of a sudden you realize, I've been doing this for 1,000 lifetimes. And so more, go ahead.
Just really quickly, what's your definition of channeling?
Channeling is where you are the literal vessel. And it's like, I would describe it as a vehicle where a light of energy, information, frequency will absorb into your physical body, and you will be off to the races. You're an observer. You are a complete observer. What comes out of your mouth is to be determined by the actual source of information. And so you will have this like visceral experience where it's the energy will saturate through the channel's body, and it will be an admission where you feel like you're standing around a fireplace. And so that, from anyone on the outer circles of the direct source of information, the channeler will experience this physical response where you can feel the heat, feel the chills, feel all this, yin and yang experiences.
And did that being Lao Tzu, did he actually communicate through you?
Yes,
in language? Okay,
yes.
okay.
So it was like so foreign to me, because I've heard that I had this voice that I didn't really identify. People talk about this stuff casually, but they still don't understand the depth of what that means. Like if you and I are having a conversation right now, you go, look, you physically got 5 senses, right? This is your identification of the human experience. There's 5 senses. You're off to the races. Now go out and enjoy your life. Now, you can say something, think something, speak something in your mind. You've added 3 senses right there. And people go, actually, you're right. There you go. All of a sudden, things have changed because it's a dialogue that people have. They don't even really understand that they're already there. They're already experiencing something paranormal, supernatural, intuitive. And so the voice was always just something that was leading me. But when I hear an actual voice from him coming through me, and I'm literally witnessing something, an emission coming out of my physical body, and I have nothing to do with what is coming out of that, it's a little profound. And I think, quite frankly, because I had the attitude where I just accepted and allowed, which is generally the consensus of Daoists, which is just accept it as it is, be childlike in your nature. I had nothing to push off on. I wasn't immersed in a religious belief or a spiritual journey. I went from what I considered something very material, very tangible, a physical, experience, to something that was beyond that. Yet when you start applying it, you're doing all of the above within everything that you do in your life. And it just seems to translate through in this material form. And so that conversation ended, and he literally, the teacher had a nervous breakdown. I thought, I don't understand that. He literally he got so lost that the following week I did a reading on him. And I said, okay, he's assuming, you're green behind the ears, you're some Neanderthal. Okay, you channeled Lao Tzu. This is great. And it was very evident to the 20 people in the room plus him, this is a transmission that is not of this world. This is crazy. This is nuts. And he was a little livid. And so when I channeled him, when I basically gave him a reading, because he was teaching us how to do readings, I was like, okay, so basically your guides from what you're telling me is the construct of how I'm getting this information. The information is very clear. You are messing with lower frequency energies, and you're doing something that seems to be sort of ominous or dark in its nature, and you're commandeering a lot of people's minds with the way that you basically siphon their energy. And he goes, stop. And this was so obscure because I don't have an expectation. This is one of the key things to channeling and really understanding where the information is coming from. I don't have an expectation. I'm not looking to decide what the outcome is. And so when that happened, he freaked out. He goes, listen, let's go away from the group right now. I need to have a private conversation with you. I said, listen, clearly through your own reaction, this information is real and it's freaking me out. And they're saying even more clearly, if you don't stop, you're going to die. And he's like, I can't stop. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like part of my negotiation with this. And all of a sudden, all this is like verbal diarrhea was coming out. He was explaining his contract with this energy, right? And basically, as long as he continued to create these relationships and siphoning from all his audience, he would continue having this superpower that he had. And so, of course, he said, please, can you not share this with the rest of the group and just leave it between me and you? And I said, they're saying that you're going to die. You will physically no longer be here. I just want to let you know. And 6 months later, I had him in my arms, and he was like, he had brain cancer and he died like not too much after that. It's like this type of like, the charge you and I are getting right now. It's like, this is so tangible and real, and you identify with it. It's like the visceral experience cannot outweigh all this other stuff. So, you get into the idea that maybe you read a book, you got motivated by some scripture, but it's not until you experience it yourself that you have any idea of the validity of it. And as you should. I mean, our dear friend, we'll go back to Tom, be skeptical. And quite frankly, I was a little skeptical, but I couldn't deny the physical experience, and I couldn't deny the audible experience. I couldn't deny the visual. Like when all of a sudden, and I was completely grounded person, never had any episodes of depression or any emotional, like, considering I came from a background where I was supposedly coming from a broken household of one parent. And, I was immersed really, quite frankly, around a lot of feminine yin energy most of my life. And I attribute that to part of the journey of my cultivation, is that yin essence, which is so, instrumental in the development within the Daoist path. And it all just sort of added up as, I wasn't sort of commandeered by this, even though my mother was a radical feminist, she, to her own admission now, years later, will go, that was a psyop, a little bit of a brain melting experience. Yet I experienced this whole nurturing, maternal, earthly, grounding expansion that gave me insight that I didn't really understand until I had that experience. And so when you get there, it happens in all types of forms. So he died. At that point, I was already on my journey pursuing Taoist practices. And that week, after the first week I channeled Lao Tzu, I experienced a phenomenon that I'd never thought of before. So I got into, this idea, and I was shown how to start, distance healing. And most people still to this day, when you say it, a lot of people are a little like, what does that mean? Well, we're all in tune. So when I finished this distance healing, I had this conversation in those days, rotary phone, people calling me. And at the time, my friend called up and she said, look, I'm not going to be able to meet you. I just finished a day of training. And I said, all right, well, that's too bad. I was looking forward to seeing you. I'll see you next week. So she has this conversation with me. And she's about to get off the phone. And I'm like, so what's going on? You hurt yourself. She said she sprained her ankle. It was the size of a watermelon. I'm like, okay. All right, I'll see you next week. And I go, what's up? And she's like, what? I learned this thing today. Now, it's on paper. At this point, when you channel, and this, when you attune yourself, it's like this instant, like, reset to the highest resonance that you could imagine. Like the second I accessed Lao Tzu, when he was like literally in my head, I'm going at a point where I've been given the admission and permission to understand this. Now, if I didn't have someone to actually show me, hey, look, you're hearing voices in your head, you're experiencing this emission of energy, to the credit of that teacher, if I hadn't have had that, that would be considered a psychotic episode. If I hadn't have had that reassurance and going, now, of course, there are no coincidences. That was supposed to happen the way it was, but it was a remembrance that was instantaneous. Now, that is like nothing I've ever experienced before at that point. Now, once I got that going on, and then I did this day of distance healing, right? Sort of pretty dramatic. I'm like, okay, well, of course, it says it on the paper here. It says I experienced it. They're saying to me that this is what could take place. Why wouldn't it? So she's about to get off the phone, and I go, look, stop for a minute. I'm going to go through this list of things. And she's like, what are you talking about? Let me try something. She's like, all right, just hurry up. Look, I just go, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And I'm like, let me go through the list on the paper. And then I'm going to do this thing. Don't get freaked out by it. There's this thing they call an incantation. I'm going to run through the incantation at the end, and just don't worry about it. She's like, hurry up. I'm like, okay. I go through the list. And at that point, there's, hand mudras. There's a state that you need to be in. You're looking a certain direction. And at this point, what Lao Tzu was telling me, which is really profound, was don't worry about all the intricacies of this. I am going to align you so that you get a result instantaneously. I'm like, this is sort of a very advanced training. And I'm assuming if I don't do this right and I do it wrong, someone's going to lose a finger, or maybe their head will blow off. Who knows what happens? And he's like, don't worry about that. Just follow the instruction. I'm like, okay. So I follow the instruction, and she's like, can you hurry up? I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the incantation. And I finish with the incantation. I say, heal. Nothing, just in my sense, it was nonsensical. And she goes, what the? She starts screaming through the phone. She goes, what are you doing? What kind of sorcery have you just performed on me? And I'm like, what are you talking about? My ankle shrunk before my eyes, and I'm standing on it, and I have no pain. And she's freaking out. I'm like, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. She's like, no, I'm not. Get over here, and you could see for yourself. And I'm like, this is like, how more magical can you get, right? I'm like, my skepticism, going back to our dear friend Tom, be skeptical. Come on, it's ridiculous. I get over to her house. She runs to me as I walk through the door. We're familiar with each other. I sort of curtail the conversation, because if any of my kids ever see this, I don't want it to be like, well, is there someone before by me? Who's that? Yeah, I don't want to go there. So yeah. I always I minimize some things. And so she runs to me. She gives me a hug. I'm like, what's going on here? Her mother's in her house because she's living with her mother. And her mother's sitting on a couch, puffing away a cigarette. And in those days, you still get on a plane and people are smoking on the plane. You can go in a restaurant, people are smoking in a restaurant. This was not uncommon. And she had a Polaroid. She took a Polaroid before, coincidence, and after. And she's just like, wow. And the mother's puffing away there. And I'm like, what is going on here? Quite frankly, I'm still digesting the fact that I'm some profound channeler that channeled Lao Tzu. I've got Lao Tzu in my mind. And I'm really on the verge of going, am I crazy? What is going on here? There's so much going on. And the mother just starts puffing away. She goes, I always knew you were a healer. And I'm like, this just gets better and better by the second. You can't make this stuff up. This is crazy stuff. This doesn't get any more insane. And I'm like, okay, so I'm this profound channeler. I've got this dialogue of audible and visual things going on. I'm seeing him around the room. I've got hearing him in my head. I'm hearing his voice as clear as I hear yours. And then I've got this, you just witnessed this incredible miracle where, in my mind, being from an exercise background, when you damage, ligaments and tendons, they don't have the same skeletal muscle flow as the skeletal muscle. So the connective tissue take longer to heal because there's less blood flow. So that's how I'm processing. I'm going, and so you have a sprained ankle that literally healed in seconds through this thing that I call an incantation, and it's called distance healing. It's a big pill to swallow, right? And so then the mother's like, you know what? I need you to come back. And I've got something wrong with my foot. I don't believe in doctors. Like, this woman's like, basically, very affluent, has tons of money. Her idea of therapy is a bottle of vodka and a pack of cigarettes. And she doesn't do doctors. I'm like, what do you want me to do? You need to take a look at my foot. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No worries. So 2 days later, I turn up at her house because I was still, with this other person. And I'm like, I don't know, this is going on, this one thing after another. I go from first time I ever meditated to channeling to this healing thing to all this stuff. And then I'm pursuing this idea of a Taoist path because it seemed like it was resonating with me, even though I had no religious background. And my mother sort of didn't really, she exposed me to what they called Church of England in Australia when I was very young. And it never really made sense to me. Like, oh, Sunday school, read the Bible. No, it's not working for me. And she didn't pursue it. She's like, if you don't like it, don't do it. And so I didn't do it. And so I come back to this woman's house and she's sitting there, distended stomach, bloated, drinking is her favorite thing to do. She's puffing away. She's sitting on this couch. She can't see her feet. I don't think she's seen her feet in 20 years. I honestly don't. But she has people pandering around. She pays them. So they'll do whatever they want. The housekeeper, the assistant, whatever. I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Can you go and take a look at my foot? I'm like, okay. And now at this point, I've got this dialogue with Lao Tzu. So it's him. I'm hearing it. I'm like, okay, I'm hearing him. I'm seeing him. I'm trying to get used to this idea of this visual thing and this audible thing. And it was only because of the guidance of that, the teacher, that I would have any sense of this. I mean, I would literally call it a psychotic episode. This is way too much.
Can I just quickly stop you, right?
Yeah.
Why Lao Tzu, right? Was it because the meditation that you went into was kind of somehow connected to that, and then that was, it could have been, if it was a church you went into, it could have been Jesus who turned up.
Yeah.
If it was a Hindu church, temple, it could have been Krishna. So do you believe that it was
100%? It was
totally
like
connected
because
okay.
everywhere, once I did that meditation, everywhere I looked, if someone had their mouth open, I would see a yin and yang symbol. If someone was just looking at me, I'd see a yin and yang symbol here. And it was like this add up. And it was like, I was just reuniting myself with what I already know, with the family I already had from a past life. But it's so dramatic, because I think what's really cool about your story and mine is we came from a background that was so on the other end of the spectrum to go into something so deeply, what someone would consider in the word spiritual, that it's like a slap in the face. You want to get a bump over the head and get a realization of something completely different. And so, I never, and it was so resonated. Everything resonated with me when it came to Taoism. It was like, this is who I am. This is part of my lineage, part of my life, part of past lives. And it was just instantaneous, and it made complete sense. And so I sat down, and I'm looking at this woman's foot. She's got up on the stool. She still can't see her foot. She goes, how is it? It's been irritating me lately. I pulled her sock off, and I'm not kidding you, Gareth. It was black. It was gangrenous, and I shit myself. I went, what the? And I'm looking at it going, how's it going down there? And Lao Tzu chimes right in and goes, we're going to take care of this. I'm like, well, how more crazy can I be at this point? I've never taken drugs before. I'm not into drinking. I'm not into pot. I'm not into mind-altering drugs. And this is really happening. And it was because I accepted it from the beginning that it just kept piling on and piling on. And it just made sense. It was like more affirming, more validation, more realization. And so in my mind, I'm like, let's get this woman in a car, take her to the hospital, because I'm no doctor, amputate the foot. And she's like, well, what's going on down there? And I'm freaking out. He's having the dialogue with me. I don't say anything. And he goes, you're going to witness a healing. I'm like, what else? At this point, why not? Just sign me up for more craziness. And literally, I'm not kidding you, in 40 minutes, I watched that flesh go from literally black back to pink in color. I couldn't believe it. And it would melt. So when you're witnessing this physical flesh transformation on a second-by-second basis, it's like you get a space. And I would do this a lot with people that had like lesions or, other effects of most skin disorders, i.e. diabetes, things of that nature. And so what happens is you get it like a patch. Let's just say you've got a scab. And when you watch it, part of the attunement of the physical body is there is this channel that runs through you. You use the eyes as a lens. The third eye as a lens. Is actually within Daoism, we have 9 eyes, but that's a whole nother story. We'll go there. And you're literally witnessing it wiggle and transform and shift and get smaller and smaller before your very eyes. You think it's so crazy, and you watch it happen. And the heat starts to permeate, and the actual recipient will speak on how hot it gets because of the transmission. Now, there's this culmination of this cycle of hot and cold, which is representative of the yin and yang experience. So you're taking, within Daoism, we take the yang energy, which is the direct source of Dao, which can be a reflection, another reflection of the mother, right? Everything is a mirroring effect. So the mother is the source of all things. And then the yin energy is a much deeper primordial mother that is basically the center point that encapsulates those two energies. Does that make sense?
So okay, so just to let me get my head around them energies. So we have prana and we have shakti. So prana is just like, so in your model, what's the prana in
prana would be
your terminology,
chi, right?
Okay.
Prana would be chi, yes?
Yeah.
And shakti is more an enhanced, pardon me?
Yeah.
Enhanced.
The shakti.
Which we call this the magnetic fluidity, right? So part of that yin essence is that you're accessing the primordial mother. The mother is always the return to all things. So it goes even deeper. So the prana would be the yang energy, which someone would call it God, but it's actually a reflection of the mother. It's still it's powerful as the yin energy, but there are different gradients of these energetic potentials. Does that make sense? And so when you're watching that or someone's receiving it, it will come in that form where it's a very visceral experience, where you are the recipient of a subatomic level transformation that is undeniable, as it should be. I mean, this is part of the whole experience. So when you transmit, just me sampling your transmission of any posture, it's off the charts. It curls the eyebrows. You are there. You're opening the gate to this experience. And it will be a symbiotic sort of like oscillating experience. And so that's where you get, when you get your eyes open and you're able to see with your eyes open, which everyone can, it's just a developmental skill. Don't ever dismiss it. Don't have someone go, oh, well, it's not your gift. It's not your life. No, that's just, in my opinion, from my experience, just not true. There's no one that cannot access these clear senses. And that's why they're developed through methods of what we call absorbing the riches, and you chi pack this stuff. So when you're chi packing, I don't know whether you've ever heard of this term before, you start to saturate the physical body. You want to condense it so it overflows. You want to feel like you are literally like this luminous, like plutonium dump site of spiritual energy, right? So you saturate it to such a point where, in some cases, people refer to this as iron shirt training, iron fist training. There's a level of development that takes place. So there's 3 layers. If someone was to connect with you physically without the understanding of what the energetic potential is, you have to hit someone 3 times before you break through this layer of energy that is saturated within the core, which is the physical body. And so this saturation. And so you witness this. So I witnessed this, and I was just, she was like blown away that her foot was better, but I'm witnessing an obscene, like, physical healing that, in my mind, I was obsessed with Hollywood movies, superhumans, supernatural, that it was like in line. And the more Lao Tzu would teach me, the more he would say, well, this is part of it, right? This is part of you understanding what is possible, because that stuff that you had been obsessed with as a child is reality. This
superhuman,
is
like comic book heroes.
Yeah. It's real.
Yeah.
You can cultivate this state of awareness if you are given the right tools. If you remember who you are. We always go back to the remembrance part.
What is it that makes that happen in that instant, right? Because I've been around some healers, and it seems that they can go in and access the non-physical, work on that aspect of you that needs working on, but it takes time, right? Because it's like in a physical reality, like in the non-physical, we can make change very fast there, right? We could just use our mind, it changes, we can alter it.
Mm.
But in the physical reality, it's a lot slower, it's more dense.
But
So
that's it.
how, yeah,
You just answered it for yourself. You frame your construct. I don't have any limitations. I don't believe that's not possible. So the fact that someone frames it, it's the idea that, you're slowing down time and you're altering things due to this 3D reality, presents basically a wall that you have to climb over, as opposed
okay,
to
so it's putting a limitation on the healer by
yeah,
believing that it's okay.
100%. Because if you have this idea that you're setting up your dinner table with a knife, a fork, a plate, you are setting the stage. You're setting the space that will either be or not be. And it's really about not even the individual. It's about that present moment. That's the only way it works. So yeah, the only reason I got the crash course of remembering who I was, I had zero expectation. And so when I am and I don't want to even say it, it's like, it sounds like, when I am the observer of this stuff, it's just about being now. And then the potential, the substance that we call, chi, presents itself, because it's a resonance that you continually cultivate. Just like, you and I lifting weights and understanding that, if you can get stronger, you can get more muscular, you create, an endurance. That physical stuff will always be met by a diminishing return if you're not maintaining it. This does not have to be that way. This state that we talk about with consciousness and the ability to access the present moment means you're no place, no person, no thing. You can't be attached to, I'm the local healer, I'm the next coming of Jesus Christ, I'm going in there and doing anything. And it's not about, a lot of these people, a lot of healers, light workers, all this type of the category that we expose to, get involved with the idea that they need to validate themselves, which is the first mistake, because you get caught in the weeds and you'll forever be in a cycle where you'll just come short of it. You'll get all postured, you get all in your state, your lotus position, your resonance, and you'll bring this visceral like moment. And then when it comes down to the wet ass hour of the Death Star, where Luke goes in and hits that one point, I'm just going to say it, you shit the bed, because you make it about yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. So what you're saying is ritual, right? They have to go through a whole ritual process to access something. And what you're saying is that, no, you can just tear all that apart. That's not needed. You can just go straight in the present moment and do it, because you are that source and you are the creator.
100%. I'm not dismissing ritual. I teach people ritual.
Yeah.
There's a progression to things. There's a progression. I am going to be 100% transparent. I literally move straight into being in that supernatural state of awareness instantly decades ago. That's just how it is. Now, people remember, but part of the Daoist path was cultivating that and helping people have building blocks. And, even that, Lao Tzu and all my teachers will fast track an individual that is acquiring these type of developmental skills through their practices, and it will be determined that way. And it doesn't have to be, this, 9, 10, 50-year journey for you to realize that you're a state of consciousness. You can obtain it very quickly. It's being able to truly accept that. And that's that part. So a lot of people get punished by the spiritual dogma of, never make it about yourself. Well, of course, selflessness and servitude is about the present moment. Now, when you say not making it about yourself, it absolutely is the mirroring effect of what Daoism represents within a dualistic experience. And it's your mastery of being able to get into the center point between the breath in and the breath out, as we always speak on it, the bellows effect. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Your ability to access that is part of the energetic potential. That's why alchemy is so, in my opinion, the most important thing for a seeker, because then you're not having this, psychotic, contemplation or episodes that you're not able to validate. It's a fleeting moment. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, and then you're left with this what could be, and it's never realized. That's where methods are so important, in my opinion. Once you acquire them, then you get to that state, because it's like lifting. When we lift weight, you have a certain period of time where you develop that skill. Like if you haven't lifted for 2 weeks and you go into a lift, you're going to be super strong. And people are like, well, how is that possible? You haven't lifted for 2 weeks, because you have built up this incredible band of energy, and it all comes down to the eccentric load, which is not the concentric, the contracting load, the extension load. And by extending, you create the strength. And if you load it correctly through certain methods of training, you will get stronger. So initially, you take a break for 2 weeks, you come back, you're, 10 or 15, 20% stronger, depending upon who you are, what you've done, resting. This spiritual stuff is on a whole different level. Once you acquire an access of this resonance, it never leaves you. You can literally do nothing and go and watch Netflix for 6 months and eat bonbons and do nothing in any way, shape, or form that is spiritual. And the second you tune into that resonance, you're back up and running, in my opinion, sometimes tenfold, because the accumulation of that is that infrastructure is being developed, and it continues to accumulate and expand on itself regardless of your conscious mind. Does that make sense?
Totally. So, I mean, look, just for an example, right? I see, spiritual teachers, and they have to have the picture of the guru and, the flowers going around it, and they have to light the candle and burn the incense and get into the right mindset and mood to access that energy. Whereas I know from my experience, I don't need to do any of that stuff. It's just there on tap 24/7 whenever I don't have to be, I don't have to bow. I don't have to, do a prayer symbol. It's just there. It's just there always.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nonstop flow. But the whole journey, like your journey and my journey, is our journey. And so when people people go, well, you don't need any of that stuff. Maybe they don't, but someone else perhaps might need training wheels to get to that state. And that's why I think it's so. What I have found is my relationship with ritual, my relationship with my teachers, is a really beautiful thing, because you appreciate and nurture and value. It's a value of that present moment. Like decades later, when I witness a healing, it's as if I saw it for the first time. I'm like a giddy little kid going, oh, because that's how I value that very moment. And I truly believe that value, which you also bring, is so critical to maintaining that resonance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, just wanted to say, right, that our teachers are so important, right? Now, the ritual is not so important, but we wouldn't be doing what we do if it wasn't for those who came before us and sort of pass the torch along, right? Because it's transmission, and something has to have come before to pass it on. At least in my experience, that's how it worked. It's like the force of the guru.
Oh, 100%. It was like just all that energetic potential. The second I experienced what they call meditation for the first time, and I realized, holy crap, this is the stuff that I've been watching in movies. You can stop time. You can stop a whole part of what you consider your reality at will. Why did I get this memo? Like when I first came out of the chute, why you had to give me 20 years. Of course, everything happens perfectly. And the biggest downfall of anybody is falling into the human condition, and then envy and jealousy arise, and they get limited by, oh, well, that didn't happen for me. It happened for you. And I think now I've wasted all my time. I always remind people, you have never spent a second in this conscious incarnation wasting anything. Taoism is fundamentally it's very clear. Not a second has been wasted, because we always remind ourselves, remind the man, mortality is real. This transitory moment of this physical body is to be remembered so that you can nurture it. And that's why the Daoist seeker for immortality and the cultivation of alchemy is so critical, because we want to nurture this vehicle for the longest period of time within this incarnation, so that you can get the most out of your conscious clicks and then re-up on the next one. And so there's a lot of value to that when you take the time to tune in to the 50 trillion cells. You do what's necessary to master the alchemy so you can saturate your physical body and then tap into pure source at will that you're familiar with. And I think a lot of people get caught. That's where they get caught in. You and I tap into it. For me, I just tap into the mother, and it comes in the form of Lao Tzu or another 171 teachers I have, and it will present itself in what someone would call a supernatural, superhuman experience. And it will come in physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It will be transmuted that way.
So the teachers, San, they're ascended masters, right?
Yeah.
Previously human?
Yeah, some of them. Like, Lao Tzu, of course, was, being poised as, the equivalent to Jesus within, Daoism.
China.
From
China,
from China. And, he was really touted as more a philosopher, yet the insight that he has, and every time I have conversation with him about this, it's like the universe is speaking to me and giving me the very inner workings of this present moment. And that's why within Daoism, within the Tao Te Ching and everything that I teach people, that is what we call the magical register. And so it goes deep into the nature of each verse. Is not a verse, it's an incantation. And each incantation has 81 levels of conscious development that you acquire with a frequency, a color, and a shape. So when you are the experiencer, the seeker, and this is a visceral thing, this is an auditory, inauditory moment where you're hearing it, or you're hearing it in your mind, or you're hearing it with your ears, you're experiencing that, and it will come in a visual form. And so the sensory perception development will come over time, and there's a way to acquire that. And the more you cultivate it, the faster it becomes more apparent. So it doesn't have to be a deficiency. Because what's most important for me is that people are aware of this stuff. If you're framing your reality with this idea that emotions are such a center point, which so many people tend to focus on that, they don't realize that this is just another, what my dear friend Martin, the Buddhist monk would say is dukkha, distortion. It's a distortion of reality. Yet if you speak like this in front of someone like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, that's a delusional comment. You can't make comments like that. That's absolutely not true. Now, personally, this is part of the deficiency and in my opinion, putting all your eggs in one basket. I always tell people, if you come from neurology, psychology, biology, physiology, you are limited at best. You must understand that the truth lies within you. And that's why we always refer to, let the man who's never left the village, let him know he's seen the world. Because you always return back to that center point. That's that charge you and I got. That center point is where it is. That's how it becomes real for you. And then a lot of authoritarians get very disturbed when I say your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And people are like, whoa, because that's it. if you even slightly lay that down on Tom Campbell's model of my big toe, it's all simulated by your experience. It's all simulated by the variables of your probabilities through your attention intention. Now, within a Taoist path, that is the part. You are a slither of the diamond, a facet of the diamond, which is perfection, the mother. And so you're experiencing things where you're sitting at one end of the table, I'm sitting at the other end of the table. That's consciousness. We have an orange in the middle of the table. You say tomato, I say tomato. That's it. We're all part of the same symbiotic sort of experience. We're all one. It's that unity, as a physicist would call the singularity. That's the be all or end all. And so, you gravitate to what gravitates to you. Have gravitated to your own validation and verifying moments of truth and self-realization through the very path of, Shakti and Samadhi and all these things that are terms that make sense to you. And if you look closer, you've probably gone into your past lives and you realize that you're a yogi in a past life, or you're, a reincarnation of an eternal immortal that has been, validated through this physical flesh, as we all come to this realization. So have I been a Buddhist monk before? Yeah. Taoist priest, Buddhist monk, a Catholic, Christian. We've experienced all these different things, but what's resonating with you on this re-up? What is the thing that really brings it home for you, that you can tap into that present moment, that makes it palpable? That, for me, that's, the secret sauce is that Pepsi challenge. You have to feel it. If you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you are feeling. And that's the be all or end all. And so when someone experiences your transmission, they go, what? They're like, oh, the hairs are raising on the back of my neck. I'm feeling this reverberation within my physical body. There is something going on that is beyond my control. But is it? You feeling this visceral experience that has this, what New Age people would call somatic response.
And San, this can happen for people on the very first go, right?
Oh, yeah.
I had a woman turn up in one of my meditations yesterday. First time, never. She said she only ever meditated maybe once or twice before for 20 minutes. And she said at the end, her stomach was vibrating. She had energy. She couldn't even stand up at the end. And I mean, like, that could take someone 10 years, right? Just sitting, meditating by themselves. But when they come in contact with that field, and they can absolutely like reach out, touch it, pull it into themselves, and it can change them, right? In an instant. So that's what you're basically communicating.
Oh,
absolutely,
right? Absolutely. 1,000%. There is no exception to the rule. You can, just as you and I literally moved into this stuff and it was instantaneous. Like for years, I was breaking chairs. And people are like, I want whatever he's having. And it's like, it's just an energy that's flowing through me now. A lot of, more mastered practitioners would say, no, it's all the muscle. You're being resistant. It's like, enough of this. Like, my personality is like, I'm experiencing it. And even to this day, if I wanted to right now, I'm experiencing the energy. If I move with the fluidity of it, I'm moving like this, and I'm moving like this, and I'm moving like this. And then if I hit it more, it's going through me in a certain way. And all I'm doing is just sort of sitting back, and it's like a vehicle is the tuning fork of this physiology, yet I can tune into it and be in a rapid convulsing moment in seconds. And it depends on where you're at. But it's not a hindrance. A lot of people go, oh, you're not controlling your energy. Please. First of all, don't give someone a limitation and realize that they're experiencing this visceral knowing, a remembrance of who they are. And it's profound. And there's absolutely zero negative things that are taking place when you identify that. You're just like, whoa. She just had a moment where she's like, I'm remembering, and holy crap, I've never experienced this before consciously in this lifetime. And that's what gets people excited. They're like, whoa, I was basically committed to the mundane. I was committed to the 9 to 5. I was committed to the misery. It's like work 40 hours a week, want for the weekend, get a week off once a year, get married, have kids, buy a house, and then die. This programming is now diminishing on a second-by-second basis, where people are feeling more liberated, that they don't have to be bound by academia. They don't have to be bound by a piece of paper that tells them that they are this. I identify as this. This is what I'm worth. This is what I've put my time into. And that's where, the mastery is in attuning with a method and making sure that it's repeatable for you, the seeker, the experiencer, no one else. And for you to determine that is the truth. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. No one else's. Someone can resonate with your material and not mine. Someone could resonate with mine and not yours. It's just where they're at in their own resonance.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say early on, that was something I was like, why are people drawn to this person and drawn to that? And I was like, that's just how it works, right? It's not everybody is just, it's like the flavors, right? The flavor that's coming through in the transmission. It's like some people just in their body, they feel a resonance. It's like a tuning fork. Okay, this is, I feel this here. That's where I'm going to go. And they have their own navigation system internally, and they're always right. You can't get it wrong when you do it that way either.
Well, yeah, the contracting and expanding makes it real simplistic, as it should be, but then people get into the intellect and they get into the limitations of that. And some people will say, well, that's the mind. Well, no, it's a construct of a very limited viewpoint. Your blinders are on. Your blinders are on. And then that's where, coming across yourself or myself, where we can show you something that would alter your consciousness in seconds. And people go, whoa, okay, I can't deny that. That really happened. That happened. Now, I may spend 6 months attempting to process that and understand what that means, but it took place. And, so a lot of people they're seekers, they're curious, and they're the ones that are ultra energetically sensitive, yet they're also very reserved. They don't want to speak on it. They're afraid of the response that happens when you go, oh my goodness, I felt that, I saw that, I experienced that. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot in this space, I've observed anyway.
So in your work, when you're teaching people, what is taking place? Like, what's your goal when you're working with people? Is it like an awakening of sorts? Is it an energetic awakening? Is it healing? What's happening to the individual who comes and starts to sit with you?
Yeah, it's basically you come in with your old dusty diesel engine that you haven't used in this lifetime, and then I reveal it to you. So I use the analogy, it's like the Mr. Miyagi effect. So a lot of my students will start off with something that seems so benign, and they're like, really? I mean, I feel good, I feel relaxed. And within a few moments, within a few days, I then test it. I go, okay, now apply this. And they're like, holy crap, I can actually see into someone's thoughts. I can actually hear them. I can actually experience and see the energetic potential in their auras. And it's like, it's only real until you say it is. But the infrastructure, there is a method to developing that infrastructure. And so I like to get people to assume they're driving around in the Pinto. And then I go, okay, now it's time for you to pull over. And they're like, okay, now get out of the car, go to the hood and open the hood. And they go, oh, it's a Lamborghini engine. Where did that come from? Well, it was always there. But the way that Lao Tzu and the three Purons teach is, I'm not going to front load you with an expectation. So what the first conscious awareness that takes place when someone starts any type of practice with me is that they experience it in a visceral way before the words are coming out of my mouth or the transmission is taking place. And so they get the epiphany very quickly. So if they're having an interaction with Lao Tzu and he has a dialogue, and all of a sudden that those words have come in the form of this energetic potential, that he will call on, say, for example, the spirit and energy of the sun. And before he even says it, they experience this whole physical, visceral experience of that energetic potential. And they go, after that, and it's always in retrospect, so they sit back and after a transmission, they go, before he even said it, I experienced the whole feeling. I could see it coming in, because you're not front loading with the skepticism of the human condition. It's very important for me sharing this and helping you remember is for you to be able to describe it for yourself. I'm not going to give you the definition. You come to the same place, I can promise you that, but you're going to have to create that from your experience. It's not going to be me going, if you do this, is going to happen. I will give you the construct of it, and it will be a developmental skill where you will create the alchemy. But when the intricate details come down, you have to identify with them and show them to me that you have absorbed that next level of resonance. And it will be for your own self-realization. Does that make sense? I don't know how you teach.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, right? You just one thing that just I noticed there, you mentioned the three pure ones, right? And as soon as you said that, I felt an energy coming in on the right side of my face, coming down under my chin. Can you straight away, it was just as soon as you hit that word, it was like, oh, I noticed energy. So can you talk about the three pure ones? Tell me what that is, who they
the
are.
three pure ones, they came to me almost immediately. So in a nutshell, Lao Tzu came in. The following day, Yellow Emperor presented himself, who's basically the center point or the access point from the universe to Chinese culture as we know it. A lot of people would say he was the creator of Daoist alchemy. Of course, he was mentored by, Jade Emperor and the three immortals. Now, the three pure ones are facets of the mother, of course, but they are the creators of the cosmos. Right. So in essence, that experience you just had was your accessing or supreme purity, which you can feel that resonance of, and then it repeats itself in the same sort of spot in your head, is because you're connecting with his energy, which is all the light from the Tao. And it comes in the form of that space, which is your upper dantian. Now, when I say jade purity, you can feel a more settling in density within the center, which is the dantian, the middle dantian, which is the earth energy, and he's the keeper of the information. And then finally, when I say highest purity, you feel this lowering of this density energy in your lower dantian, which he's the keeper of the energetics, the magic, and all things related to that. It's like you just go to your which department do you want to go to right now? Now, once you attune these, the three of them work in concert, and you've attuned it internally, when you lead with your head, your heart, and your gut, you're 1000% accurate.
So I was going to say that's head, heart, gut, right? You're talking about.
Yeah. And so this is the sun, this is the earth, and the lower dantian is the moon. Now, a lot of people, I recently had a guest on, and she like instantly got a download. I normally don't teach that depth of understanding of the mechanics until people become more familiar with the profile of the energetics and their relationship with the three pure ones in of itself. But she instantly got to the primordial mother, which is like something that she can reference and she was aware of that goes even deeper for thousands of years ago within the construct of the universe, how that was developed into the moon being the cauldron, where if you do any alchemical processes, most people, I've never seen anyone share the stuff that I teach. The cauldron is heat. The cauldron is fire. That is not the cauldron that I speak of. That is not the merging of yin and yang, the merging of conscious and unconscious. So you're bringing everything together as one, and that pit, that development, then transmutes into anything, because that magnetic fluidity is the secret source. It's the juice. You always return to that. And within Taoism, the gift is your offering. This is the mirroring effect of that. So when you, as a catalyst, a conduit, a tuning fork, are in bear witness to the scripture, you are mirroring 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching, 81 incantations, all return you back to that center point. Every word, every letter, every symbol has a direct correlation and returning to that center point. And the experiencer will feel that. The experiencer will see that. And it depends on where you're at initially on your own clairvoyant senses. When you read the scripture that I transcribe, it's a visceral thing, regardless of who you are. You're like, holy crap. I don't know where I am, but this is substantially dense. And I didn't know what that was. I thought I was having an episode, potentially a heart attack. And this is an interesting thing, and maybe you would like to speak on this too. It's like a lot of people have these physical effects that they correlate to WebMD, not realizing these are energetic potentials. Tingling in their hands. Oh my goodness, do I have diabetes? No. And you tend to fall into this state unless you're given guidance. You get into this back and forth unless you have that knowing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess if you take someone who has no knowledge of our energetic system, and then they start having a Kundalini awakening, right? They're going to think, God knows what's going to go through their mind if they've got, no background on what that energy is. They'll think, am I having a stroke? What's going on? Have I got a tumor? They'd have to go and get. I mean, it reminds me of Bob Monroe in the early days. If you ever read his very first book, Journeys Out of the Body, he thought he was dying. He was convinced he was waking up with these energetic frequencies running up and down his body. And he was convinced he had some sort of tumor that was pushing on his brain, that was creating this byproduct in his body. So, yeah, I totally get it.
And so when you start off and you hit that center point, the reverberating, oscillating feeling, in some cases, and still to this day, the resonance is so high. If I was to describe it, it would feel like you're at the verge of this highly anxious, energetic, dense energy that is going to pop me off into a heart attack, a stroke. And that's just the energy percolating. And so when we start to, you call it Shakti, when we start to cultivate the chi and we saturate the physical body, it becomes palpable. It's like, your second sheath. You have this sheath of energy that is from the core coming out, and it doubles and triples and quadruples in layers. It continues. There's no limit to it. But the more dense it is, and if I choose to put my attention to it, it can be super dense to a level where people are like, what are you doing? And like, this is where, PK or kinesis, where a lot of these mentalists and magic people tend to pretend that they're able to do this sort of state, even though they really are, where you envelop two people that are standing opposite each other, probably arm's length, and you basically envelop them. Once you attune yourself, you can instantly, we're all in tune, right? So to the observer, it looks like two people are standing there. You get one person to close their eyes, and you scratch the nose of the other person, and the person with their eyes closed, you ask them, did you feel that? And they're like, you scratched my nose. And the audience goes, whoa. Now, a lot of magicians, mentalists, they tend to play this game of illusion, but that potential is it's a fundamental development for any Taoist seeker to be able to acquire that skill, because that's just like part of distant healing, is tuning into someone's field and being able to realign the energy. We're not altering the energy. We're just giving you the resonance, and you're returning back to it going, oh, I remember that. And oh, wow, And with that, when you align yourself, all of a sudden miracles start taking place. And you're like, hang on a second, you just showed me how to ride my bike. I'm taking my training wheels off. Or I never swam a lap in the pool. I was dog paddling. The second you showed me how to do freestyle, I was able to do it. And that's exactly, I believe, what you and I do when we bring this resonance in, is helping people remember. Now, there are events, like the physicality aspects can be problematic initially if you're not running on the idea that I'm open to receiving this. It's going to happen regardless. So you can either take it as a stroke, or you can realize that you're having this awakening, as you put it, that presents itself and you attune. And, it's like anything you get into, over the years, I think you sharing on our podcast, it's like, you get to certain points where you develop skills. I've developed so many skills, but then I don't really return to them once I acquire it, like whether it's shocking people with electric shocks, separating electric from magnetic. I much prefer bringing a resonance and having that person observe their own healing, rather than getting into the semantics of, okay, let's get down with this. I've had people that receive a healing, and this is back in the day. I used to love taking sebaceous cysts and rising it to the top of their skin and then watching it pop open like, 4th of July. And, you watch the heat, you feel it, and it happens. And it was cool for quite some time. But then you go, okay, this is about servitude. This is about selflessness. And it's not about me going, that's not possible. But it was profound. It still is profound. Yet it wouldn't be the first thing that I go, hey, look, I need to sit down and I'm going to focus on this. Is what needs to happen. For example, my son the other night, his teeth are coming in. He's like 9 months old, and he just went off. He's like, I don't feel good, so I'm going to start crying. And, you have a moment where you stay in the humanness, and you're like, oh, well, let's just give him a healing. And if you don't create the right resonance, he doesn't remember. So if you react to that moment and you go, well, I'll just give him a healing, let me just run some energy through him, and then there's evidence that is not what's going on, you have to remember. Now, the second I brought the resonance to him, he went from hysterically insane to passing out and going to sleep. And it only takes a few seconds. But when you're immersed in it and it's of your own personal interest, whether it's a loved one, whether it's yourself, you tend to distract yourself, remove yourself from the present moment, and you can potentially not get the result that you're looking for. And so, when people come to me, and Tom and I have had this conversation, I think we talked about it, where people come to me and go, you're that guy they told me to call, my family's having health problems, and, grandma's in a coma. This is a classic one. Grandma's in a coma. She's going to die. They're telling you she's got 24 hours. And if the three pure ones tell me, hey, look, we can quickly inject the probability it's going to change, I'll say it. No, that's not going to happen. And they're like, oh, and the next day, grandma comes out of a coma. Now, all I did was tune into the information and the energy they're giving me. I didn't sit there and focus on it like, I need to cultivate this energy, this needs to happen. No, they came in by the interaction of their universe, bringing them before me. All I did was bring the resonance. The three pure ones made it present. There are no coincidences. They were supposed to be there, and poof. Now, quite frankly, that happens pretty much on a regular basis. And I don't ever claim to be the guru healer. It's a resonance. And then, the biggest thing I want people to take away from that is, once you acquire this skill set and you can tap into it, it's not about me. I'm not interested in the outcome. So it's like, I'm not committed to it. It doesn't bother me. So a lot of people are like, well, isn't that a little detached? No, I'm just about having that moment as the resonance. It's not place, person, or thing, first person, third person, no person. And because I'm not committed to it with an outcome, like, I need you to tell me I'm the next coming of Jesus, I'm a healer, I'm amazing, I'm this, I'm that. It just happens. And that's part of it. And people can get distracted because when they get into this, healing game, because it is a game from Tom's own admission, that healing game becomes a problem because people get committed. Well, people tell me you're a healer and you didn't heal me, or, oh, I had this problem and I came to you. And, this is the issue with this whole space, is that people are more concerned by the validation of others, and they get an experience, they get a taste of the dragon, the spiritual dragon, as we speak of, and they get all excited about it. And then they get caught up in, I need people to keep telling me I'm amazing. And it's not, and it's not necessarily because they're looking for the ego boost, but they don't want to lose it. I remember distinctly when I first witnessed this stuff and Lao Tzu came to me, I'm thinking, I'm getting all this rhetoric in the background of other people going, well, if you don't cultivate this thing and you don't eat plants for 6 months and you don't abstain from sex and all this stuff, you're going to lose this. And I would have deep conversations with Lao Tzu and the Three Pure Ones. They're like, you've remembered, you're not losing anything. It's just going to get stronger. Yeah. And that was an initial fear of loss that comes with this whole experience. And once you realize that you can wake up and go to sleep and you're in that same state, that same resonance, and it never leaves you, it'll only get stronger. There's a wholeness that comes with it. There's this completion that comes with it. You're now returning to that state. And, it has to be verified, right? You have to verify. That's why I always get people to start.
You have to go through it.
Right.
I did the same, right? Early on, I started having the ability to transmit energies, to what they call spiritual cities. And then all of a sudden they wouldn't be there, or I would feel like I depleted them, or I had done something by eating the wrong foods, or, and somehow and then it just got to a stage where it was like, oh, I can actually do whatever I want and it's not going to have an effect whatsoever. It's almost like I'm no longer governed by the rule of the karma here on earth. It's like, yes. I can, yeah.
Amen to that, bro. And that's the part. It's like like Daoism and like sexual practices and abstaining from
they're useful, right? Right. They can be part of a spiritual practice, but then you can go beyond that.
Oh, and that's the whole point. Once you are 100% this moment, that means all bets are off. And so people go, well, what does that mean, Jifu? And I go, well, it means that you're every zodiac sign, you're every constellation, you're every incantation, you're every moment, you're every magical spell, you're every moment of consciousness, you're every immortal, you're every entity, you are everything, you are all things, you are nothing. It's now. And that's that choice, as our dear friend would say, being aware you have choices. And you have that choice. But I personally believe by fortifying the chemical process, it's a validation that you don't get caught up in the psychosis of, oh, it's just in my head, it's not real. Because you're able to produce a result. And that is very important from a humanistic perspective, because you are tapping back and forth into this present moment, personality self, spiritual path. And as long as you're switching gears, you're always on point. But if you don't, and you get caught up and you don't have a support system that verifies and validates that, the fastest way to validate it is to experience it. That's the first and foremost, the truth, the only truth you need to be concerned with. Then you can get into a slippery slope where you get caught up in the semantics and, you can be run away with, and people tell you you've got to have all these, forms of protection and all, Look, I'm not going to dismiss that, because it's a path that some people have to go on to get to their realization of who they are. And so I would never dismiss someone's practices or rituals. But once you start getting there, I can perform a ritual. Like I read a book, I could read a 600-page book in about 30 seconds and obtain the most valuable piece of information, go right to the page, right to that information in seconds, because that's how you attune to the information. That's how you attune to the now moment. And, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, there are no coincidences. And once you do it once, and that's why I always go, have you heard of the parking ferry? Have we talked about this? The
No.
parking ferry. So the parking ferry, I love to use that.
Oh yeah, of course.
The
Yeah,
parking
I
ferry,
don't know what it is.
it's so benign, and people are like, well, they're unassuming. So they go, well, what's the parking ferry? I want you to do this. You'll be in the car with your family and your husband, your wife sitting next to you, your kids are in the back. Quietly in your mind say, I want a parking space at the front of wherever I'm going. And this way, you're not being subject to judgment, someone going, oh, you said it was going to be there. It's not. You're just having this dialogue with the now moment. And you say, I want this to be present. And it happens once, you go, oh, that's a coincidence. Then it happens twice. It's still a coincidence. Then it happens 47 times, and you go, maybe there's something to it. Because there is this simplicity where you're not invested, you're not being subject to someone else's judgment, you're not getting the stage fright that comes with, you said you're going to do it now, which contracts someone and has them remove themselves from that present moment. And then they get caught up in, it's my reputation, it's my name, it's my identity. And that's where a lot of healers they fumble the ball, and they get, deep into the weeds. And, I had the juice, now I don't. I used to see entities, now I don't. It's because they get caught up in that need for approval. When you just are, and you don't care, and it's not a fleeting dismissal of not being in tune with humanity. It's about just being now, just being present. This is where paranormal, superhuman, intuitive things can take place all the time. But the idea, if you walked up to someone in the street and said, look, don't be anything, just be this present moment. I'm going to give you this feeling of resonance. And they go, wow, that feels weird. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. My heart is super dense. This is the now moment. Really? And then they go, now apply that to something. Now, the big issue for that is, it's kind of like going down the secret path, right? The secret being the book or whatever.
Yeah.
Is the biggest downfall of that was they asked the experiencer, what are your values? Now, of course, your values are not the present moment. There's no such thing. So to obtain that resonance means it's in void of you, your identity, your personality. And it's so simplistic, yet there's generally a path that comes with it. And, you and I and many others and a lot of people that I teach will have that moment where all you do, and it's like the mirroring effect of what we speak of within the yin and yang bellows, which is the contracting and expanding. You find that center point. The fastest way to do that for anybody is breathe in and out and hold your breath. That is the center point right there. And all of a sudden, what people will notice is, whoa, I held my breath for a few seconds and I felt this accumulation of dense something. I had tingles in my hand. I had feeling. Generally, people don't understand how quickly they can access it through that simplicity. And so whenever I have someone that goes, oh, I've never felt energy before, inside of 3 seconds, they go, holy crap, is that what that is? I've been experiencing it all the time. Like, I go to bed and I wake up and I'm like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. There's so much energy that's accumulated within my physical body just from respiration through the course of the night. It's like, oh yeah, I just wake up energized. I feel amazing. It's just setting your table, setting your knife and fork, setting your plate, and realizing that's as fast as, and that's as quick as it can happen. If you say it, it is so. If you believe it, you know it to be true. And that's the only thing you need to be concerned with, your truth. And that's that part where you need to come across you or myself or as somebody that can exhibit a resonance where they can remember and go, my goodness, whatever she's having, I want it. Because it starts there, in my opinion. What do you think?
It's a memory. It's a remembrance. So when they come in contact with that energy, it's not like it's a new energy to them. They've known that energy before. So it's like, it's like a coming home. To me, that's what it is for people, right? That's when I first experienced it. It was like, oh, this is what I've been searching for, right? This was it.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I standing here, sitting here, I'm off in the stars. We're having this conversation, but I'm moving through the constellations. I'm experiencing visceral experiences, moving through planets. It's an experience. I'm witnessing it with my eyes open. I'm talking to you. I'm having this visceral experience because it's just about attuning. And it doesn't have to be an OBE. It doesn't have to be an NDE. It doesn't have to be sleep paralysis, which seem to be the common denominators that people associate with the Hollywood version of what that is. But it can be validated quite simply. When you can tune into this substance and the energetic profiles are so tangible and clear, when you do anything that's of a supernatural paranormal status, whether it's remote viewing, clear senses, all that stuff, that's self-realized. I always love doing, just a psychic reading on someone, what I call a black ops psychic reading, because people get sobered up real fast. They get sobered. It's like, hang on, you're some guy who looks like he's got a beard. And, if you see me on the street, I look like somebody who likes riding a Harley with a cap on, whatever. And I'm unassuming. And so when you go, I don't walk around going, I am the Daoist priest. You just go, hey, would you like this as a passing offering? And then when someone gets there, I always like to start with the energy center at the bottom, because within Daoism, the first 9 dantians is the connection between the earth and the universe for any Daoist seeker, creating the infrastructure for the physical body, that energetic potential. So I always start at the bottom, do the earth, which would be a transpersonal point for many people and how they see their connection. Then it's the root chakra, or what we consider the second energy center. And so you start there and you give people a little bit of a taste, and you exhibit like, well, hang on, there's virtue and there's an emotion of virtue that's attached to that. And all I do is read it off. And then people get a little concerned that I can tell that they're definitely, there's someone who loves parameters, who loves to be very withdrawn from society, that doesn't like to reveal themselves. And they're like, this is strange. I don't know you. What are you? And then at first it's like, what are you saying? And then I get to the sexual energy. And then they're like, whoa, stop. I don't want to, we're good. We're done. And then they go, this shit is real. Yes, it is. And I didn't have to conjure up something. I wasn't closing my eyes. I wasn't calling in, a guide or God, an angel. It's this present moment. And that's where I really always reiterate how important the potential is and how to cultivate it. Because once you do that, yes, you have the resonance, and maybe that's not your desire. Like I said, I've got many friends that are immersed in things. They've had Kundalini awakenings. They're Kundalini teachers, and they have no desire to get involved with what you call siddhas or suitors or whatever they're called in relation to a yogic path. They just want to be present. They're not interested in the healing. They're not interested. They just be present. And it's always someone's individual path. I'm not going to determine what that is, because that's for you to determine what that is. But what's most important is for someone not to steal that from you. And well, what does that mean, Shifu? Well, it means that if you fall into a victimhood, humanistic, human condition situation where you're being preyed on by someone else's perception of reality, and you have fear as the basis catalyst, you're going to have your whole reality framed by someone else's idea of what that is. And that's where Gareth and I just bring in that resonance, and that's for you to decide what that is, not a definitive construct. And this is what happens when you come out of your body and you go out into the universe. And this is what tends to go on. And Tom and I agree wholeheartedly with this. It's like, you're getting what you want, right? But a lot of people tend to fall into that. I heard this NDE, and I want my soul contract, and I want this, and I want that, and there's going to be karmic. And I always remind people, that's for you to decide. If you resonate with that, and that's what's happened. But there are a lot of people that fall into, I hear this is my expectation, this is how it happens. And in lots of cases, that's how you form a very limited viewpoint of what your experience is. And it can be problematic for many seekers, and they get caught in that construct because they're not getting that. So they're like, hang on, someone told me that when I get out of my body and I go and see the stars and I see all this stuff, I'm not seeing that. I see nothing but darkness. What does this mean? I'm not seeing any images. I'm not feeling anything. And so, of course, that expectation can create limitations instead of allowing the person to develop the skills by using methods. And by using those methods, instead of like front loading them with the idea of, just know that this is a method that will develop a skill. And you start to do it through simple things like the way that you're being presented a respiration and then energetic potential. The first thing is to identify your energetic potential, because then you can start playing with those profiles. And then all of a sudden you can move something over here and do something over there, like icons on a computer screen. You have a more in-depth understanding of it. So then you can start playing with it. And then from a remote viewer's perspective, the ideograms, the ideo connection that you have with source will start to present itself. So you have your own language. You'll have your own language that presents and validates what it is you're experiencing, rather than putting it in a box. And, I read that, Deepak Chopra said the only way it's going to happen is da-da-da-da. This to me is a red flag, in my opinion. It's an absolute
total limitation.
An absolute truth that is, in my opinion, not the truth. It's not your truth. Your truth is whatever you want it to be. I love this moment. It's like we bring up Deepak Chopra, and Oprah had that moment in history, even though I'm not a fan of either one of them. But in any case, that's my personality. I can have a personality. And
sure.
She said, she brought him on in the 80s, I think it was. She's sitting there and she's like, welcome back to the Oprah show. And I have I've been so excited for this guest, Deepak Chopra. Welcome to the Oprah Winfrey show. And all the audience is like, yeah. And he's sitting there and he's literally in a lotus position on the couch, wherever she's talking to him. And she goes, how are you, Deepak? And he goes, well, my body's here, but I'm not. And she goes, we'll come back right after this commercial break and we'll be right back with you. Because that idea 30 years ago, back in the 80s, I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, it's so obscure, yet you have language like that these days, like we are on the interweb. And it's like, oh, yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, someone's talked to me about that. That's not unusual, the outer body. But then it then becomes problematic when they start constructing this whole, this is how it's supposed to be. So when people get disappointed and they're supposedly following everything and then it doesn't happen. And that's why I always say, be childlike in your nature, accept and allow all things. This is a Daoist path. And so I truly attribute a lot of the re-entry of my knowing who I am to the fact that I just accepted it. I just looked at it and went, okay, this is what it says. I know that if I go into the gym and I lift weights, I'm going to get a response. I'm going to get a result. And, squatting was always my favorite thing. I don't know about you, but legs were always my favorite thing. And my all-time favorite exercise was squatting. It was,
yeah.
What about you? Was that
legs? Well, yeah, I mean, I trained legs every week, but it was never my favorite, I have to say. But just going back to you just mentioned this childlike nature. It's something I'm always telling people, like when you're looking at this thing called spiritual awakening, right? You have to look at it like, how a child would look at the world, right? It's just like no story, just awe of everything. And magic happens when you're in that state. It really does. You come back to that childlike magic that we have as children. So, yeah.
Well, I haven't limited my children. I've got 6, but I've never limited them on their belief system. So, even something as simple as Santa Claus, they can experience the energetic profile of Santa Claus and the presence of Santa Claus. When I welcome an energy, this is something where you want to create a relationship with the spirit world. You want to go deep on that. Always be in a receptive mode of welcoming. A lot of these methods, especially within Daoism that I debunked a long time ago, was they have what they call deity magic. I'm not a fan of it. I won't participate in teaching anyone that type of stuff, because my relationship with Lao Tzu and my 171 teachers is a relationship of welcoming and appreciation of value that is reciprocated. They value myself as a catalyst and conduit for this very moment, and I value their incredible insight and their immortal, transfer of this resonance that I share with anyone that I'm in company with. And so a lot of people tend to lean towards commanding this. And I feel like that's part of the losing the entry point to this realm of endless possibilities, is by attempting to command these entities to do their bidding, as opposed to creating a relationship. And when I welcome an energy into a space, people are like, holy crap. And I can actually ask the energy, the spirit and energy, to stand in a certain part of the room, and the experiencer can experience that energy move through their body, sit in their body, feel their energy field, all this kind of stuff, because it's really happening. And that's really important, in my opinion, is creating a relationship that is of equal value. Because again, we come back to this mirroring effect. And if you dismiss that, then all of a sudden you're dismissing just yourself. And so this little piece of the slither of the pie can help someone when they're starting a relationship, is experiencing these things and the energetic, if it's Lao Tzu or if it's Jimi Hendrix, or, more recently from me, I haven't really had time to sit down with personalities, but Dolores Cannon or Art Bell or, Bruce Lee in the last 6 or 12 months, they all just come in at will. If you want to sit down and open the doors, you're open for business. As they leave the lights on, you will be surprised at how quickly the evidence will be there. And just like insight into stuff that, of course, you know nothing about, and it becomes really apparent, and you refresh that. And, energies are sometimes not what they seem. There's a little bit of fear peddling in relation to channeling that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessary. Yet a lot of people tend to use that as a point of, you need me to teach you, or you're going to be in deep trouble, which I think is problematic.
Yeah. And maybe we can get into that again. Maybe we can do a part two, and we can really get into the channeling and the teaching. Would you be interested in coming back
absolutely.
for that?
Absolutely. I would love that. I mean, we can experience Lao Tzu, and, it's all part of the whole thing. It's like, you people don't realize how, once you get a hook on something, what they think is a fleeting moment, because the Jade Emperor always reminds me, and I remind others, all thoughts of your mind are not yours. And then people go, well, who the hell are they? Well, now that's an interesting question now, isn't it? So when you start to identify with that, going right back to the fundamentals of energetic potential is where you really get into the meat and potatoes, because then you can start validating what information is coming through, where it's coming from. And that's the cultivational practice that I believe is really a fundamental of anyone's seeking, is to create a very clear path of your understanding of what this information is, so that you can decipher it and transcribe it and make it validated for yourself and others around you. And that will come very quickly for most people. I mean, I could literally sit here for days without sustenance, without food or water. I could sit for days, and the three pyramids will just give me, any information I want about anything. And I could write a book that would be equivalent to someone's lifetime's experience in hours, if I just sit there and just transcribe their stuff. And I mean, that's the fun part about this stuff. And I mean, I love looking over the YouTube landscape, and so many people are becoming aware of this attunement. And then there's also a lot of people that realize that perhaps maybe this is a great way to make money, because no one can validate what I'm saying. Well,
very true.
The prediction stuff is a little problematic for me. Lao Tzu is always in the camp of sharing a greater picture of things, but not limiting it to doom and gloom, because again, it's part of the contracting and expanding. Whereas if you're being aware of the potential of something expansive, look what happens. You resonate with that. It's all of a sudden, it's like, the old expression, if something bad happens and it comes in threes, it's what you believe in. If you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have good luck, then you're going to have good luck. If you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have bad luck, you will have bad luck. I mean, it's that simple. The narrative is no harder or easier than just that, which I think most people get lost in the weeds of this stuff, and you can get down the path. What are your thoughts?
That's a great message. No, I totally agree. Right, I've seen it so many times. It's just people's thoughts on like luck, having, like, even when they get up and they stub their toe, it's like, oh, now I'm gonna have a bad day. Yeah, you're gonna have a bad day. That's just you've created that. You've set the ball rolling, and that's what's gonna play out. And
and it is. It's like the starting and ending. What we call part of the Taoist rites is a morning activation and evening activation. And most people have this. It's like a cycle of what we call the human condition, because it's a hermetic response. You want to start and finish things. It's in the instinct of who you are. You must start and complete. So when I put my hand down and go, hey, and you just out of auto response go to reach out and check my hand, this is a compliance, but a need to complete the separation. You want the link. Now, then you can get into deeper layers of mind manipulation, where you start getting into people attempting to control your very behavior. And people are like, Jiffer, what are you talking about? Well, this goes off into, things like NLP and hypnosis and stuff like that. People can consciously want to attempt to manipulate or commandeer your attention. And it doesn't have to be anything you should be fearful about, but you should be aware that these are mechanisms that can access your state, your mind, your consciousness. And being aware of them is, I think, a fundamental thing that is necessary for your own expansion. And a lot of people, when they start understanding how linguistics work, it's not the old Mesmer sort of idea where look into my eyes and watch the pendulum. That's not, listen, in 3 seconds, if someone understands how to use linguistics, they can commandeer your very attention. And that's all it takes.
Well, look at advertisements, right? Television, that's what they do. They can get you into that hypnotic state and then sell you something like that.
Right.
San, I think we've probably come to the end. I have a meeting coming up very short. I would sit here talking to you, but we'll do a part 2 and we'll cover the channeling and get to all the mechanics of how that works. I'd really love to do that. In terms, if people want to find you, Sam, where should they go? Right? You've got a YouTube channel, you've got a website. I'll put links down below.
Yeah. You can find me on the YouTube channel and the website. Look up San Qing. You can find me on YouTube.
The Way 126.
Way 126 experience. And, welcome, my dear friends. I would love to hear from you, and I look forward to, helping you remember.
Wonderful. It's been incredible, Sam.
It's been awesome, brother. It really has. Thank you so much for,
what a conversation.
Spending some time with me.
And I really, really appreciate you being so generous with your time as well.
Oh, I've got to admit, I'm giddy. I'm a fanboy of Gareth here. And it's, it is. It's expression, like-minded. You're just a resonance. We're oscillating, and it's right there. So I will look forward to a part 2, and we're going to have you on.
Thank you very much.
On channel too. So we'll just keep this going.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched, and them, the people who listened on the podcast as well. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, San. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.